So, for today's episode, I would like to talk about social intelligence. Now, social intelligence is going to be, of course, a multi-dimensional aspect of life, and I want to go deeper into it. And the reason why I'm even speaking on it today is because it's something that I'm truly fascinated by, something that I've constantly tried to improve, and I've done countless hours of research into a lot of these topics that I'll be talking about today. And I kind of want to break down what that really means. So I'll give you a little bit of a definition so you kind of have a more of a firm grasp. For the people that already know, please bear with me. But social intelligence refers to the ability to understand and manage oneself and others effectively in a social situation. It involves a combination of skills, including self awareness, empathy, social skills, and enabling individuals to navigate interpersonal relationships and social interactions with greater ease and success. So, without even needing to explain anything, obviously this is important. This is something that you need to develop. This is something that is essential to having a less of a friction when it comes to just navigating social interactions in general. And I do believe that this is really going to set apart the good from the great. I feel like the great have a certain level of social intelligence that can transcend words itself, right? So, yeah, obviously I want to start the podcast by saying obviously there's two forms of social intelligence. I would like to define it like that, right? You have the nonverbal and then you have the verbal, and those two things are going to be something that has been a theme that I've talked about over the last two podcasts. So if you're interested on any of those, one is referring to women and one is referring to another topic as well. So if you're interested in that, I'm in the middle of a mini series, so tap in with that for sure. But other than that, if you do not know who I am, my name is Champ, and I help men build their foundation of masculinity. I help them with topics like this today. So make sure you go and follow me on Twitch, TikTok, Rumble, and on Spotify at Life of a Champ podcast on every single platform. And yeah, let's go ahead and get into it, man. So I think one of the most important things that is truly a superpower when it comes to social intelligence is to be socially observant. And I feel like this is something that people kind of do unconsciously, right? And I do believe that there's a lot of people that do this, or rather don't do this consciously at all. And this can be very costly, because if you're not necessarily aware of your surroundings and what's truly going on, then you're not even living in the same realm of reality that a lot of people are. And there's going to be certain situations that you will find yourself in where it is a lot more awkward than what it has to be. Or maybe you don't even feel the tension in the room because you're so unaware. So I think it is very key for you to be observant. This is something that, if you're struggling with socially, this is something that you're going to need to take more of a conscious action to go ahead and develop. For me personally, this is something that was always of my interest, and something that ever since I was a child, I was always very socially observant. So when it comes to breaking down social intelligence, this is something that I had a decent grasp. And once I started to double down by learning it consciously, and taking the action to go do the research and stuff like that, it made a lot more sense, because I was able to put into words something that I didn't necessarily know that could be put into words. And of course, there's going to be plenty of parts of social intelligence that are the nonverbal that you really can't necessarily explain with words. But for the ones that you could explain, it definitely helped. It helped create a stronger foundation. That is what I hope to give you today. So, one thing I want to mention with this, right? Being observant, right? I feel like there's certain people that, when it comes to being observant, they kind of view it as you almost taking a back seat in a social setting, and I think that's going to be the wrong approach. I do believe that you can be socially active and engaged while also still being observant. I think if you do one and only do one, you're going to be lacking. Even if you're actively, just being social, you can get to the point where you're not observant enough, and maybe you say the wrong thing. And I feel like if you're too overly observant, or too, yeah, maybe you're too overly observant, maybe you're taking a very passive approach to actively, um, engaging in social interaction. So I think that being socially avoidant as a social creature like us humans are is unacceptable, especially if you want to be exceptional. So if you're a person right now that is watching this that truly is just trying to learn something from this, just know that route of being socially avoidant is in essence hell. And I think you need to take it with that level of seriousness. I would never want to be or live a life that is going to be a socially avoidant one, whether it's talking to women, whether it's building friendships, whether it's building, just small interactions, right? Introducing yourself, getting to know other people, even on a very, very superficial level. I think it's absolutely essential that you view it that way, where it is absolutely unacceptable for you to be in that position where you are constantly finding yourself in a position where you don't want to talk to women, you don't want to make friends, you don't want to, just have a small conversation with somebody that's on the side of you, whether it's passing by or maybe it's just the person that is the cashier or something like that. So you need to, if this is something that you're truly struggling with, this is something that you're obviously going to need to take a lot more conscious action to get out there, and obviously to put yourself in public situations where it's going to allow you to actually, develop those skills. I feel like with being socially avoidant, not only are they taking a backseat in a social setting, I feel like they're also not putting themselves constantly in social settings that are going to allow for them to develop properly. So you can't run away. If you feel like you can run away, just know that it's going to catch up to you, whether it feels like it or not. There's a lot of men who develop a lot of their. I'll use this as an example, right? There's a lot of men that develop themselves, but they keep neglecting this one thing, and I'll say this more particularly when it comes to their interactions with women. And just because you have everything else developed doesn't mean you have developed the skill that is, you know, being socially intelligent enough to, engage with the opposite sex. So you can't run away. So don't try to run away. Don't think it's okay, because if you think it's okay, if you try to run away, then quite frankly, your frame of mind, in my opinion, is already starting with a flaw. So I'm going to be talking about certain things that I have heard about in podcasts. I'm going to be talking about things that I've researched. I'm going to be talking about things that I've personally observed within my own social interactions, and I'm going to try to help. I'm going to try to verbalize the things that, like I mentioned, are rarely verbalized. So first thing I want to mention, this is one of the most interesting concepts that I had learned, and this definitely can say a lot. And if you're a person that's not exactly displaying this or reading this in other people, it's definitely going to be a very costly error, I'd say. So the first thing I want you to think about is this: when it comes to recognizing and understanding the way in which somebody is feeling, right? The ways in which they are thinking, we obviously have to be very, very observant of their face, right? Let's just say, for example, you're looking at somebody and you could just tell they're frustrated. You don't have to go over there and talk to them to know that they're frustrated. Maybe there's a certain facial expression that would suggest frustration, right? So you don't necessarily need to pick that up. And if you can't recognize when somebody looks frustrated, man, you got a lot more problems that you need to fix. But it's okay, because quite frankly, at least you know that you have a problem. So the one concept that I've learned that kind of embodies this is um associating people's foreheads as an emotional billboard, right? The lines in a person's face can say a lot of different things about their life, and especially their life's expression. So I can give you a few examples. Let's just say you have some lines around your, I think they call it crow's feet or something like that, around your eyes. Maybe that will put off the perception that you're smiling a lot more. Or let's just say there's going to be a scenario in which like I said, your forehead is going to have certain lines on it. Maybe it's like that. Maybe you have like creases that from you constantly expressing, let's just say, confused or being mad, you'll have, stuff right here. If you're more of an inquisitive person, maybe you're going to have lines more up here, because your eyebrows are obviously getting raised, right? So that's one thing that I think you need to be observant of. I also want to be very, very clear that if you're overly observant with any of these things that I'm going to be discussing, it's definitely going to work against you. I think it's something that you should unconsciously recognize. You shouldn't be like, oh, this person has this on his forehead, so this means that. It'll just be something that hopefully is gonna flow, because you're gonna know. Okay, well, yeah, you see what I'm saying. Hopefully it's a little bit more of an understanding thing, as opposed to, oh, this person has this line on their face, so that means that they're living like this, right? But just be observant of these things. So like I said, A lot of people are going to associate people's foreheads with an emotional billboard. So yeah, that's something that I also, like I said, it made a lot more sense because, like I said, you can recognize when somebody's feeling a certain way without even having to talk to them, just by recognizing and seeing that. And you can see that from 20, 30 feet away, and that'll tell the entire story that you need to know. So that's interesting. Getting into the next one, I'm going to be talking about something that I think I referred to in the last podcast that I did. And like I said, please tap in with that one because that one was a good one as well. So I'm going to be talking about blink rate. This is something that is definitely very, very unconscious, and you can't necessarily hide or conceal this. So this can truly tell the truest story of how a person feels, right? The more blinking that a person, if you're observing somebody and you're looking at them in a social situation, maybe it's a little bit of a tense situation, you'll begin to notice that they're going to be blinking a lot more often, and their blinks are going to be a lot more quicker, right? So that's something that I've observed time and time again through watching videos of people being in particular situations where they're not comfortable answering a question, or even even in real life when, let's just say, somebody's involved in some type of conflict, right? You can be able to begin to observe that they're feeling uncomfortable because maybe they're blinking a lot more. So in with the inverse, the less blinking, right? The more confident, the more calm, and the more focused that a person is. So, right, if you're watching something that is capturing your attention, truly capturing your attention, just like this podcast, you're going to be maybe blinking every so often, right? Maybe you're going to be blinking like maybe like 5 or 6 times a minute, right? As opposed to something that you're just annoyed by or something that you're not interested in. Maybe you're going to be blinking 20, 30, 40 times a minute, right? You never know. So that's something that I want to be very, very clear with, right? So less blinking is going to be associated and should be associated in your own mind with more confidence, being calm and being focused, and less and more blinking is going to signal less confidence, more anxious, and as it is a high stress response. So I think that's something that you need to be very, very wary of, and that's something that really can put it into perspective. That is going to be something that is on the fly that you can recognize, and I think just by recognizing that, let's just say, for example, you're asking a person, or let's just say you're having a conversation and it's going very, very well, and they're not blinking and they're engaged, right? They're focused, they're confident, they're calm, like I had mentioned. And let's just say you start to get into a certain type of conversation that maybe they're a little bit insecure about, and you'll be able to begin to recognize that, hey, this person's blinking a lot more. Maybe they're not making as much eye contact with me as they once were. Maybe it's time for me to switch the situation up, switch up the conversation, and maybe their blinking will maybe that high stress response that I expressed earlier will be no longer there because they're in a position where they're more calm and they're more comfortable with the conversation. So that's something that I think is interesting as well. So yeah, just basically analyze blink rate. Like I said, don't be overly observant of this, right? Don't be like, oh, he just blinked 13 times per minute. Like don't be like that, but just recognize how the blink rate can really affect whether or it can really show whether somebody's engaged, whether somebody likes or dislikes a conversation, right? And then obviously, if you want to press the conversation and you see them blinking more, go ahead and press them, but I wouldn't necessarily always recommend it. So that's just something to be mindful of for sure. So also one thing I want to mention as well, like I said, this is something that is part of social intelligence and recognizing this, and at least, like I said, at least being mindful that it exists at the very least. So this thing called shutter speed, this is going to be the rate in which your eyelids go back up. So like let's just say I'm calm, like blinks are not going to be like super, super quick, right? So if they're more slow, then you're going to be in a place of comfort, and the more quicker they are, obviously, it's going to be another one of those high stress responses where it can even gauge if you're fearful, right? If you're a person that's blinking like really, really fast, you might be more likely to be fearful of whatever is going on. So that's something to also be very, very mindful of for sure. So I'm going to be speaking on a few more things that I've kind of recognized within people, and this is something that I want to say. There's going to be a lot of nuance with some of these things, right? You have to get to know somebody to be able to fully understand, or you have to get to know them at least a little bit to be able to fully understand whether they're in a situation that's whether they're in a situation that is going to be with a reasonable cause. So for example, let me give you an example, right? Let's just say it's sunny outside and you see them like, like going like this. They're not mad, even though that would be typically associated with being, mad, right? Because that's just a facial expression that you would use if you're pissed off, right? So you got to understand the circumstance that you're in, right? Let's just say it's really really bright outside and they're blinking a lot more, right? That doesn't mean they're necessarily uncomfortable or experiencing a high stress response, but you just need to be mindful of that as well. So I'm going to give you a few things um, that I think are very very interesting. So first one, so if a person is having a conversation with you, and let's just say you want to ask their opinion about something, right? And let's just say that you ask their opinion and they answer like this. Yeah, I really, really did like it. And they do that little lip compression. The lip compression doesn't always have to mean this, but it definitely can, and more often than not, is going to mean withheld opinion, right? They have more to say, and quite frankly, that is going to be the facial expression that would suggest that there is going to be a withheld opinion. There's more to the conversation that can be had, but that person is withholding the opinion, right? And just be observant of when that happens. And here's the thing: some people do this unconsciously, and even in situations that aren't for withheld opinion. So, like I said, there's going to be that nuance that you're going to need to um, take into account, because if you see a person doing that a lot, and that's just like one of their ticks that they do, that doesn't mean that they're just withholding all of their opinions. That just means that's just something that they do, right? So be mindful of that as well. So another thing that you can observe, whether it's within your own self or whether that's something that is within, you know, when observing somebody else, right? So this is going to be one of the oddest things that I've learned. This is going to be when something enters your mouth. This is gonna sound weird, but essentially, like, let's just say you were to like put something in your mouth, like maybe a pen, or maybe it's your finger or whatever it is, right? Essentially, anything breaking the barrier of your mouth, like let's just say you can observe it as a nervous tick for some reason, right? So people would do this, and I would believe this is also another high stress response. So if you see somebody doing this, just know that they probably need and have a need for reassurance, and that might be something that I think is very very interesting. And of course, there's going to be certain situations where maybe they're just chilling, maybe they're just thinking, and maybe they just have a pen in their mouth or something like that. So you need to know the context of the situation. That's going to tell the fullest story, right? Just observing that is not going to mean, oh, they need a need for reassurance, right? Or they have a need for reassurance. So just be mindful of that as well. So, and another thing I want to say, and I'm kind of bouncing all over the place with social intelligence, just because I understand that it's super super multidimensional. But one thing I want to mention as well that I think is very very interesting is when it comes to understanding people that are very very good at speaking, or people that are, let's just say, I'll just say socially extroverted, right? People that get along with a lot of people very very well. There's going to be certain things that they do, certain ways in which they express themselves, and I think this is something that when I became a little bit more mindful of this, it allowed me to embody some of these things. So the question that I have for you is this, and this is something that I asked myself, right? What are common ways of being while having good speech, but in another language, right? I feel like there's certain common things that a lot of people do, whether it's using their hands, whether it's the eye contact that they have, that is going to suggest that they're comfortable and they're socially competent. So I think observing, even in another language, you can tell whether somebody's socially competent or not, right? This is something that you don't even need to know what they're saying. They could literally be saying the most insecure thing as well. But if they're saying it and they're embodying a certain spirit when they're doing it, it's not even necessarily going to really, really matter, because it's that nonverbal thing that I was talking about earlier, right? It's that nonverbal communication that really tells a story that transcends even speech, right? That transcends anything that you can't say, right? Let's just say somebody tells you, "Hey, you know what? I'm super super happy," but obviously their body language is suggesting something else, and obviously they're not, right? They're telling a lie, obviously. So I feel like just observing people who are very very good at speech, right? I think it's going to definitely add to the social intelligence that I'm talking about today. So be mindful of that. I think speech is definitely very, very important. As I've kind of addressed over these last few podcasts, how I've really emphasized the fact that nonverbal communication is damn near everything. But this is also coming from a guy who literally wanted to improve his speech. So that's why I have the podcast in the first place. So, of course, I think it's very, very, it's a worthy endeavor for you to improve your speech because at the end of the day, you can, you, there's certain things that you can't say, right, with your body language, right? So when it comes to expressing your ideas and things like that, I think it is very, very key for you to be um, socially competent in the way in which you can speak and articulate your words a certain way and convey and embody a message that is greater than the one that you can express non-verbally. So I think it's very, very key for any person that is trying to evolve socially speaking, right? Especially with their social intelligence, it's definitely going to be very, very key for you to really focus in on speech, right? I think it's probably one of the most underrated things that people would never talk about because for whatever reason, it's maybe not the coolest thing to talk about, but at the end of the day, the people that are very, very cool, the people that are very, very popular, the people that you want to be like probably, they're probably socially competent. They probably could speak very, very well. So you probably need to work on that, right? It's something that we all do. It's something that we practice, but quite frankly, just because you practice and do it all the time doesn't mean you're any good at it. So if this is something that you want to improve on, I would highly, highly recommend doing it because, quite frankly, since I've done it, it has completely changed my life. It's completely changed almost every single relationship that I've had. It has completely changed the way in which I embody my confidence. It has completely changed the way that people see me now. So, definitely very, very key. Whether it's making a podcast or whether it's having more conversations, whatever it is, in order to better your speech, I think is definitely a worthwhile endeavor for you to go ahead and focus in on for sure. So, um, and like I said, I know I'm kind of going everywhere, but I just want to give you a few pieces of information that I think are interesting. So, getting into the next one, getting into the next thing, um, something that I've observed, and I've also had a friend who embodied this. I had a friend who embodied this, and I thought it was very, very interesting because I didn't understand why he did it, but when I had learned about it, then it started making a lot more sense. So I'll give you this, right? So let's just say, have you ever seen a podcast where they're not directly in front of each other? Like they're not directly looking at like me and you, right? We're looking directly at each other, right? Some of the podcasts have like a tilt to their chairs, right? So instead of facing like this, they're more facing like this, if that makes any sense. Hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say. But there's a slight tilt in their chairs where they're not facing head on. And one of the things that I had learned is when you're facing head on with somebody in your mammalian brain, right? It is signaling that there is a potential threat there. So if you see in bars, there's not really too many places. There's not really too many bars that exist where they have face-to-face interactions like that. Usually everybody's either to your side or there is a tilt in something. So I think that's interesting because it's one of those things that you don't necessarily think about. So I'll give you the example, right? So my friend or my old friend, he would sit, so like let's just say it was a four-person table, right? He would take one corner and he would never take the same corner or the same so like let's just say you were to sit in a there's a quadrant, right? So let's just say you would sit in the bottom left corner, right? Instead of sitting in the top left corner with you, he would sit in the opposing right top right corner, right? And he would do this because he understood, at least this is what I think, he understood that when you're facing head on, it is more of an adversarial, um, unconscious thing that exists, and it has to do with challenge. It has to do with a lot of different things. But quite frankly, if that's your friend, then obviously you don't want to be in a position that's going to be adversarial or challenging or anything like that. So that was a conscious action that he had made, and maybe it was unconscious, maybe it's something that he learned. But at the end of the day, I think it's something that is worth mentioning. So, like I said, just tend to be observant of this when it comes to your own social situations. If you want to diffuse something, maybe it's best to not be face to face with someone. Maybe it's best to be, you know, um, either side to side like this, or like I said, at a tilt. And I think that is just so interesting because it's not something that most people would even think. as a threat. Oh, and I'm sure there's people that are going to be like, of course, I sit in front of my friend all the time. I don't view him as a threat. He doesn't view me as a threat. And like I said, it's something that is deeper than your own feeling and deeper than your own perception of reality. It is something that is like a super primal sense. So um, that is just something that I think is very very interesting. So another thing I want to mention as well. And like I said, I know I'm going everywhere, but I just want to mention these things because I thought they were interesting. So the next thing I want to mention is this. So let's just say one of the most important things that I think about when it comes to social intelligence, if you want to be a very, very socially intelligent person, I think at the end of the day, one of the things that you really want to build on is your authority, right? So, like, let's just say it's an authority within a situation, or let's just say it's an authority within a position that exists within something, right? To understand truly what are the characteristics of authority, I think is very, very important, especially if that's something that you want to pursue or something that you want to be involved in. So, I'm going to give you the 5 elements that I've heard a lot of people talk about when it comes to building authority, right? In order to build authority, you're going to need to have confidence because here's the thing, there's no way anybody's going to take you serious or think you're an authoritative figure unless you're confident, right? If you're lacking confidence and you're trying to be an authoritative figure, quite frankly, you're going to get stepped on and people are not going to respect the power that you have and the authority that you have. So, confidence is key. Another one is discipline. If you're an undisciplined person, but you have confidence, there's no way you're going to be an authoritative figure because, quite frankly, discipline is structure. If you're lacking structure, then you're lacking authority, in my opinion. The next one is going to be leadership. If you can't be a leader, there's no way you're going to be an authoritative figure because, quite frankly, that is the entire point of being an authority, right? Is to be a leader in some capacity, right? To say you can do this and you can't do this, right? Another one is going to be gratitude. You're definitely going to need to have gratitude when it comes to being an authoritative figure because if not, that's how you get into tyranny. That's how you get into all of those negative connotations when it comes to being a leader. So there's that as well. Okay, and then the next one, obviously, you need to do it and you need to enjoy doing it as well, right? So confidence, discipline, leadership, gratitude, and enjoyment. If you're able to build upon all of these things, like let's just say it's even just being somewhat of an authority when it comes to interacting with women, right? If you're confident, disciplined, you show traits of leadership, you show that you're grateful by being gratuitous, right? And also you have somewhat of an enjoyment while you're existing. Obviously, those are going to be all of the recipe that you need in order to build authority, whether it's in an interaction, whether it's let's just say you're taking on a new leadership role, or let's just say you're just dealing with the woman in general. I think all of those are going to be very, very key when it comes to building authority and obviously maintaining it as well. So, getting into the next one, 3 elements that are going to be very, very important, and especially, let's just say, the dictators of whether someone is successful or unsuccessful. These are going to be the 3 things that I think are very, very key. And like I said, if you're a socially intelligent person, these are going to be things that are obvious, but at the end of the day, you still need to work on them, in my opinion. So, getting into them, the differentiating factor that differentiates someone from successful or unsuccessful, the first one is obvious, right? But it's not too obvious. This is going to be self-mastery, right? This is going to be the constant conquest of trying to understand oneself and trying to have a level of self-governance that most people do not have, right? So, to understand yourself, to understand your morals and values and interests, those are going to be all very, very important elements of mastery, right? Especially self-mastery. So, understanding that there's no way you're going to have self mastery and not be successful in some type of capacity. So, and obviously, at the end of the day, everybody's definition of success is different. But at the end of the day, usually we're going to have very, very common things that are going to be associated with success. So, self mastery is obviously one of them. This is going to be something that I have always constantly wanted to build upon because this is something that is just so interesting, right? Character evolution is one of my favorite things to talk about. It is one of my biggest interests, and that has everything to do with self mastery, right? Trying to learn about yourself, learn about your interests, and obviously developing the skills that you deem necessary in this life is self mastery. So, getting into the next one, like I said, there's 3 elements that differentiate people between successful and unsuccessful. The next one's going to be observation, right? Something that I that I really emphasized earlier, right? If you want to be a socially competent individual and have a higher level of social intelligence than a lot of people around you, you're going to need to be a very, very keen observer. If you lack the observational skills, maybe it's not going to affect you today, but it's definitely going to affect you in the future. There's definitely going to be certain situations that you're going to find yourself in that people are going to be like, what the hell is going on with this person? You never want to be in that position because, quite frankly, it's not a good feeling. It's not a good position to be in. So observation is very, very key. Being observant of your environment, being observant of the landscape, being observant of the problems that exist, the tendencies that people have, the tendencies that you have, right? That kind of goes hand in hand with mastery, in my opinion. You need to be a very, very keen observer, for sure. And getting into the last one, another differentiating factor between the people that are successful and the people that definitely aren't is going to be communication, right? Your ability to communicate your ideas, your ability to communicate non-verbally, these are all going to be things that I've talked about over the last two podcasts that are so important that I really can't emphasize them enough. So, if you're not able to communicate your own ideas, if you're not able to communicate your own thoughts, right? Your own ideas, how are you going to be successful without that? If you're not a very good communicator, you can be excellent in one thing, but no one will even know that you're really that excellent, right? So, there's going to be people that are not as talented as you. Let's just say you're ultra talented. Maybe you're successful in your own right, but let's just say you don't have the social proof that would suggest that you're as successful as you say that you are. But in my opinion, I think social status has to do with some type of level of success, at least in my own personal definition. But if you're not able to communicate your excellence, then quite frankly, it doesn't necessarily mean as much because quite frankly, nobody's really going to know. So there's that. So yes, self mastery, observation, and communication are all going to be things that if you focus in on all three of those things, the odds of you being successful in your own right is going to be that much more of a chance for sure. So there's that as well. And I'm going to give you a few more things that I think are interesting, right? It goes hand in hand with social intelligence, right? Like I said, being able to um, understand oneself and others effectively in a social situation. And I kind of want to give you these things because I've observed them time and time again. And even though it's kind of a little bit off topic, I still want to talk about them because they're just that interesting to me. So when you begin to observe, like I mentioned, social intelligence, right? When you begin to observe people, you begin to understand truly that a lot of people are misaligned with their values, right? They might say that they value one thing, but they truly act a completely different way than in which they say that they would like to. Um, yeah, it's essentially that concept, right? So I think it's a fundamental the fundamental difference between somebody who's truly socially intelligent and someone who's not is their ability to self govern themselves, right? Right. That goes hand in hand with you being socially avoidant, right? That is a lack of ability to truly self govern yourself because you're not necessarily valuing the right things that are going to put you in the best position possible in this game of life. So, most people don't know what they want. They don't know where they want to go. They don't know where they want to go or where they should go, but they hope they get there, right? That is the lacking ability to self govern themselves at the end of the day. So, if you're a person that is going to take anything that I say with any amount of seriousness, just know this self governance thing is going to be very, very key, right? I think it is very, very important for you to be very in tune with your conscience because your conscience is going to guide you, hopefully, in the right direction, right? This is going to go hand in hand with self governance, right? Are you able to listen to that voice that's in your head? Yes or no, right? Is it, have you neglected it so long that it is no longer loud and clear to you? If that is the case, then quite frankly, you need to do some soul searching because that is very, very important when it comes to self governance. So, self governance, another one of those things that I think people are lacking way too often, right? Like I said, they say that they value one thing, but you look at their actions and they're suggesting a completely different thing. So, be very, very mindful of that as well. And yeah, that is pretty much all I have to say for today's episode, right? This is social intelligence, right? This is all that I've learned. I'm not going to say all that I've learned. This is a good amount of what I've learned, something that I thought was interesting. And hopefully you learned something from this, right? Even if it's a little, this person, if I understand that makes a lot more sense now that you verbalize that, right? When somebody's engaged, obviously they're going to be blinking less. And obviously when they're stressed, they're going to be blinking more. Even if it's a little thing like that, hopefully you learned something from today's episode This was episode 228 of the Life of a Champ podcast, talking about social intelligence, what I've learned. Tap in with the next podcast. Is going to be on Thursday. Next Thursday, if you enjoyed this one, make sure you go ahead and leave a like as well. Next Monday, I'm going to be doing a live. If there's any specific video that I'm going to go ahead and react to, or a specific tier list that you want me to go ahead and make, feel free to leave it down in the comments. I will definitely respond for sure. But other than that, I'll leave you guys off with the podcast motto. Fellas out here, man, we don't just work around here, man. We outwork. So make sure y'all work with these motherfuckers, because you know that I am, and you know that everyone else around me is. And part of that is because of the social intelligence, right? Get better, be more socially intelligent, and life's going to be so much better. Y'all have a good night.